What's up guys, it's Will back again, and in today's video I'm going to provide you a list of my top 10 movies of summer 2016. You know, everyone said this was sort of a down summer in terms of the quality of the box office films being released, and I used to agree, but now that I've made this list and I look back on the movies that were released, I don't think it was as bad as everyone says it was. Not great, but not terrible either. Now remember, this list is my own personal opinion, so if I leave a movie you really enjoyed off the list or have another that you really hated on the list, be sure to let me know why you disagree in the comments. We're all different and we all have different tastes in film, so just remember that. But anyway, let's kick this off with my number 10 movie for summer 2016, Don't Breathe. I originally saw the trailers for Don't Breathe and I thought it looked like a really interesting premise for a film in that it felt unique and creative and something different from the standard plot that we get in basically every horror film that's released nowadays. One of the things that made Don't Breathe such an awesome experience for me was because it does such an incredible job of making you feel uneasy and claustrophobic throughout. Coming into this film, I thought I was going to get a decent amount of horror because that's how the film felt in marketing, and it's even listed as a horror film on various sites. But where Don't Breathe really excels is in its thriller aspects. Rocky and Alex spend the vast majority of this film trying to break out of a house that they just broke into hours before, and once the blind man is aware of their presence, this film turns into a high-stakes, life-or-death game of cat and mouse in a confined area. There is a very high level of suspense throughout the vast majority of this film, which was aided by the very strong acting performances from the cast and exceptional cinematography and sound editing that each contributed mightily to this film's very strong thriller presence. I do think there are some cliche horror elements here that didn't quite feel like they fit within the confines of this story, a few inconsistent plot points here and there, and one out-of-place scene, but overall I thought Don't Breathe was a very well done film. And obviously many others agree, considering it had a domestic gross of $55 million on just below a $10 million budget. Okay, so number 9 is Central Intelligence. Coming into this film, I actually had reasonably high expectations because the trailers were well put together, and this actually seemed like a movie, while silly, that was gonna be a good time. I'm a pretty big fan of The Rock, so more often than not, if he's in a movie, I'll at least give it a shot because he's proven himself a very charismatic, capable, and versatile actor. I used to be a pretty big fan of Kevin Hart's, but coming into this movie, I wasn't expecting much out of him because I feel like I already knew his character because all of his characters are basically the same. And while his character Calvin is pretty similar to every other Kevin Hart character, I enjoyed his work in this one because he had more layers to him this time around. I really enjoyed the acting performances of both The Rock and Kevin Hart, and the two actually had a lot of on-screen chemistry together that ended up resulting in some hilarious interactions and scenes. I found myself laughing pretty often during this film, and that's exactly what I was looking for out of this summer comedy popcorn flick. Although silly and at times too formulaic, I liked this story overall because it had some depth to it, and this allowed me to better connect with our two main protagonists in a way that I rarely get to in comedy films. I do think there's some elements that feel very studio driven about this film, like their reluctance to show any real violence in the fear of losing that family element, which obviously paid off considering this film made $127 million domestically, but overall I really enjoyed Central Intelligence. It's funny, well written, and very well acted, and it met all my expectations. And on to number 8, War Dogs. Now War Dogs is a little bit of a different story because this is one where I saw the trailer for it in like every single movie I saw before this film's release, and honestly I thought it looked like shit. But I was pleasantly surprised because it actually turned out to be a very entertaining, fun, and even dramatic story. I've always enjoyed Jonah Hill in every movie he does, and he was great once again in War Dogs. He really shines in this movie. In my opinion, he's a very underrated actor because the dude is just versatile. He can do comedy, he can do drama, and each and every character he portrays is unique in their own way. I wouldn't call myself a huge Miles Teller fan, but I've always recognized his acting ability, and I typically enjoy him in his respective role. But he was also really good in War Dogs, and he and Jonah Hill were a very entertaining duo that I was significantly invested in. I really enjoyed the interactions and adventures of these two gun-running business partners because they were either exciting or fun or humorous or all three at the same time, and that's exactly what I was looking for out of this movie. I think the film starts really strong and continues that pace for the first 2 or so acts, and then takes an ever so slight dip in quality in Act 3. The reason I didn't like Act 3 quite as much as the previous 2 was because the filmmakers decided to focus more on the family drama subplot rather than the gun-running business, and that means less excitement and less fun for you as the viewer. And consequently, the film feels more like a family drama rather than a comedy war film, which I enjoyed the style of in the first 2 acts. Even the editing and the overall cinematography, which I loved in the first 2 acts because of how unique it was, takes a bit of a left turn in Act 3. Overall though, this is still a very good film that I had a ton of fun with. I'm actually a little surprised it only made $36 million domestically, but that could be in part because of the R rating. But anyway, we're moving on to number 7, Anthropoid. I knew absolutely nothing about Anthropoid until an awesome contributor to this channel by the name of Jay Gaga commented on my Sausage Party review and asked me if I was going to see it. Well, after that, I looked into it, watched a couple trailers, and was like, wow, that actually looks pretty interesting. I should go see that. Well, as I was watching this movie, I was a little nervous after the first act because it does stumble a little bit, and I wasn't quite sure how good this movie going experience was really going to be for me. But when Act 2 arrives, this movie really hits its stride and starts finding its identity identity, even in regards to technical aspects such as the editing and cinematography. This is a very tense, brutal, and grounded story that feels dark and realistic because it is. I like these sort of biographical historical films as long as they're adapted to the big screen in a way that's dramatic and entertaining, and Anthropoid is both of those things. When I was doing my pre-watch research for Anthropoid, I saw Cillian Murphy, and I was like, oh sweet, he's a good actor. Then I saw Jamie Dornan, and I was like, isn't that the guy from 50 Shades of Grey? I thought he was a bad actor. I tried to remain optimistic going into the film, and as expected, Cillian Murphy was awesome as usual, and so was Jamie Dornan. These two are really the driving force of this plot as Czech resistance soldiers that are sent into Prague with the mission of assassinating Reinhard Heydrich, and they both had me really invested in their characters and the overall success of this mission. I'll also say that the climax of this film is absolutely amazing to watch play out on screen. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but let's just say that the Germans don't take too kindly to an assassination attempt on one of their high-ranking Nazi officials. Overall though, this was a very strong summer film, and surprisingly I believe it actually only made just under $3 million domestically with a budget of around $9 million. The marketing didn't do it any favors, to be honest though. And on to my number 6 film of summer 2016, Nerve. So Nerve was another one that I wasn't super excited to go see because the trailers made it look like a very silly and cheesy thriller type of film that didn't look like it was going to make a whole lot of sense. So I went into this movie skeptical and left very surprised and satisfied because while the story at times can fall into the trap of feeling a little silly and cliche, it was as a whole extremely unique and suspenseful and well written. I particularly enjoyed the acting of Emma Roberts and Dave Franco because these two characters felt very realistic to me. The thing that makes these two so interesting is that they're relatable. They're relatable because they both are uncertain about which direction they want to take their lives, and if you're over the age of like 18, you've probably felt the exact same way at least once. Hell, I'm 25 and I'm feeling that now. So it was interesting to watch these characters, especially Emma Roberts' character V, step outside their comfort zones and try some new things. The way these two interact also felt really natural to me as well. This is a very nicely written film dialogue-wise. The film also has some very unique cinematography because more often than not, the characters are doing some type of dare that they have to film on their phone. So the filmmakers like to give you the perspective of the character filming their dare, which in turn helps you, the viewer, feel the gravity of their situation a little bit better. The soundtrack is also really awesome, and the choices of music each felt like they fit that specific scene in which they were implemented very nicely. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised with this film, and it turned out to be like 3 times better than I expected it to be. It actually had a budget of around $20 million, and domestically it made just under 40, so maybe Nerve 2 is in the works, who knows. And next up at number 5 we have Jason Bourne. Now this film got hit with mostly negative reviews, and I was honestly baffled by this because I didn't notice much difference, if any at all really, between this Bourne film and the other 3 starring Matt Damon that are critically acclaimed. Am I saying this is the best Bourne movie of the 4? No, it's not the best, but I don't think it's that far off in style, execution, and quality from the other 3 films. Full disclosure, I didn't watch all 3 of the Matt Damon Bourne films when they came out in 2002, 2004, and 2007. I watched all 3 of them over the course of like a 4-day period because I wanted to be caught up for when this new one came out. I, like most, feel that the 3rd installment, The Bourne Ultimatum, is the best of the 4, but I don't think 2016 Jason Bourne is that much different. More of the same isn't always a bad thing, and I went in expecting a continuation of the Jason Bourne story that felt familiar, and that's exactly what I got. I thought the acting was really good all around, especially from the big 3 in Matt Damon, Alicia Vikander, and Tommy Lee Jones, and I thought the story and action sequences were exciting and felt true to the Bourne series with things like the shaky cam, and I thought all the dialogue was very well written. All the character interactions were dramatic and well acted, and I felt like each character brought something unique to this specific Bourne story in a way that felt pretty familiar, which like I said was fine by me. Overall, I thought Jason Bourne was a really good film, and I walked out of that theater with my expectations met with a feeling of satisfaction. From a box office standpoint, the film did very well with a domestic gross of $156 million on a $120 million budget, so I could definitely see more of these Bourne movies coming in the near future, which is fine by me. Moving onward, at number 4 we have Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping. The interesting thing about Popstar was that it got good reviews, and most people were praising the film for how funny it was, yet it sort of flopped at the box office with a total domestic gross of just under $9.5 million. I'm not entirely sure why audiences didn't see this one in theaters, but this is concerning for me because this is a very funny film, albeit R-rated, which was maybe why it didn't make a ton of money. This sort of box office performance could discourage studio execs from greenlighting movies like this in the near future out of fear of poor box office results, and they could cite Popstar as precedent. But Popstar I thought was really good. I thought there were a ton of cleverly written jokes pretty much throughout the entire movie. There aren't really any weak stretches of time. The acting is top notch. I thought the story had way more depth to it than I anticipated, and the cinematography and celebrity cameos were also great. I think a lot of people don't really give Andy Samberg and Lonely Island in general enough enough credit for how talented they all are. I mean, these songs are witty, they're funny as hell, and they're actually catchy too. Those are some very impressive feats to pull off. I thought all three of the Lonely Island members shined in this movie, but as expected, I thought Andy Samberg shined the brightest. His character Connor for real actually goes through a redemption process as his career begins to collapse because of the poor decisions he's made over time. And this is good writing and character development, something I didn't expect out of this movie. The mockumentary style of this film also worked really well because they satirize the rich and luxurious lifestyle that these real-life pop stars live, and they do it in a way that's hilarious, yet at the same time gets you thinking about what life must be like for the rich and famous. What tough decisions do they have to deal with? How do they handle the stress, and so forth. Overall, I really enjoyed Popstar, and I hope to see more really good films from Lonely Island just like it in the future. So now we're on to the big three of summer 2016 film. These next three films I consider to be all great films and absolute must-sees. With that said, at number 3 we have Kubo and the Two Strings. Now I knew absolutely nothing about Kubo and the Two Strings. I didn't even see a trailer for it until the day I actually went to go see it. I check Rotten Tomatoes every once in a while to see what the certified critics are saying about certain films, and I saw Kubo and the Two Strings sitting at a 96% and an average rating of 8.3 out of 10. And I was like, what is Kubo and the Two Strings? I've never heard of it. Then I saw a trailer for it and I was like, wow, that does look pretty good. And Matthew McConaughey and Charlize Theron are in it too. Sounds good to me. And after seeing the 96%, I went into this film with pretty high expectations, and every single one of them were met and in some cases exceeded. Kubo and the Two Strings excels in a number of different areas, but the story itself might just be its strongest element. This is an incredibly well written and very emotional story that felt fresh and unique and like it had depth to it. This story is ultimately about family, and I walked out of that theater with a greater appreciation for my family and everything they do for me. I think you can point to a lot of great films and pinpoint certain messages that you can walk away with after watching them, and Kubo and the Two Strings falls into that category. The story isn't this film's only strength though. I also thought the animation, the characters, and the dialogue and the music were all awesome as well. There's basically 3 key characters in this film, and they're all very well voice acted and written. Each interaction between these characters has a purpose behind it, and each one you can look back to afterwards and feel like without it, the story wouldn't connect nearly as well. The stop motion animation done by Laika was also brilliantly done, and I love their work because you can tell it's them right away because of how unique looking it is. They have a very clearly identifiable style that worked very well in this movie. I'm extremely surprised this film didn't do better at the box office with just a $37 million domestic gross on a $60 million budget, because this is a movie that can be enjoyed by pretty much anybody. It might have been the marketing or lack thereof, but either way, this film is a shoo-in for Best Animated Film at the 2017 Oscars in my opinion. So at number 2, I have the amazing crime drama film Hell or High Water. Hell or High Water was another one that I knew very little about coming in. I constantly checked my local theater's movie times, and one day I saw Hell or High Water listed and decided I needed to watch a trailer for it. After watching the trailer and finding myself intrigued by the premise and the actors involved, I saw the film had 98% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average rating of 8.5 out of 10, and I was like, holy shit, how haven't I heard about this movie? Well, holy shit was right, because Hell or High Water was a story that had me captivated from start to finish. This story continues to build up until you eventually hit an explosive finale in a way that movies like this rarely accomplish so flawlessly. The unique thing about this story was the fact that you get the perspective of both the 2 bank robbing brothers in Chris Pine and Ben Foster, as well as the 2 Texas Rangers in Jeff Bridges and Gil Birmingham who are trying to catch them. There are no good guys and bad guys in this story. Each duo are doing what they think is right, and because of that, this story has a moral ambiguity to it that makes for one hell of a ride. All the interactions that take place over the course of this film are extremely well written, and they provide a lot of insight into the personalities and motivations of our 4 main characters. These interactions ultimately allow you, the viewer, to better understand and connect with each of these 4 characters. And when the climax hits and our 2 duos face off, I didn't know who to root for because I was invested in both their interests. And let me tell you, the climax of this film is indeed explosive and action-packed. It was the perfect culmination of all that build-up and tension that was meticulously sprinkled throughout. Hell or High Water also has some amazing cinematography and some awesome music to go with that. This film takes place in Texas but was filmed in New Mexico, and the sights are absolutely breathtaking and immersive at the same time. The environments allow you to jump right into this story and feel like you're in West Texas with these characters. Everything felt very genuine environmentally. Overall, I thought Hell or High Water was truly a great film, and I'd be absolutely stunned if it wasn't at least nominated for Best Picture at the 2017 Oscars. It's a little surprising it only grossed $16 million domestically at the box office, but that's probably in part due to the limited release it's had. I personally think it's a must-see for anyone who is of age to see an R-rated film. And now for my number 1 film of summer 2016, drumroll please. Captain America Civil War. Now, for those of you that have been watching my videos for a long time, you're probably thinking to yourself, Will, didn't you rate Captain America Civil War a 9.5 and Hell or High Water a 10? How can you put Civil War at 1? Well, look guys, I made a mistake. Civil War was literally the first movie review I had ever done, and full transparency, I was scared to give it a full 10 out of 10 because I didn't want to risk coming across as a Marvel fanboy. Although I'm not a Marvel fanboy, I'm not really afraid to be bold and give movies I love a 10 out of 10 anymore, because I learned that in this business, you have to speak from the heart. Well, speaking from the heart, Captain America Civil War is my favorite movie of 2016 thus far. I, like most men my age, considering this film made over $400 million domestically at the box office, love well-done superhero movies, and to say Civil War is just a well-done movie would be a gross understatement in my opinion. Civil War is my second favorite Marvel movie, just barely behind the first Avengers, and there are several reasons I think it's a great film. Firstly, the story. It's exceptionally written and executed, and everything is paced very, very well. The thing that's great about Marvel films and their shared universe is that we all know our characters pretty well by this point, except the new ones like Spider-Man and Black Panther, but you get the point. Civil War is the culmination and serves as the consequences of all the Avengers' actions up to this point, and the story was so great because it felt grounded. If superheroes did exist, I think this sort of registration act would indeed come to fruition in the real world, because these special individuals who have good intentions do sometimes get innocent citizens caught in the crossfire. Now, depending upon who you ask, this is inevitable, but I think the government would likely seek to control them for whatever reason. Point is though that this story puts our favorite heroes at odds, and you the viewer are forced to choose a side, which makes for some spectacular drama. The action scenes in this movie are just amazing. They're some of the best that I've ever seen in any movie, let alone any superhero movie. The airport scene is among my favorite action scenes of all time. That's how awesome it is. And although most of the characters are established at this point, this film develops them even further and does so in a very compelling way. Each of the characters were very well acted, and I personally love Chadwick Boseman as our new Black Panther and Tom Holland as our new Spider-Man. They had amazing introductions in this film, and they were my two favorite characters in this movie. I know I originally said the comic relief felt out of place at times and some events felt too convenient, but upon my second watch, I don't feel that way at all. Marvel is actually really good about sprinkling in some nice comedy in a way that usually doesn't feel forced, and it doesn't in this movie. I didn't love Zemo as a villain, but everything else about this movie was so good I can overlook that. Overall, I think Captain America Civil War is a 10 out of 10 film and is my best picture of summer 2016. So looking at this list, I don't think this was that bad of a summer movie season. I don't think it's the best we've ever had by any means, but looking back on it, it wasn't so bad. I wouldn't consider it a down year, but I wouldn't consider it a highlight year either. It's somewhere in between. Real quickly, some honorable mentions of movies I enjoyed but just barely missed out on the top 10 list were Lights Out, Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates, Nice Guys, Warcraft, and Neighbors 2. But anyway, if you stuck with me through this entire list, thank you for doing so. Now that you've heard my top 10 movies of summer 2016, I want to hear your list. Tell me what you thought about this crop of summer films, what are your top 10 films, and tell me where you agree and disagree with my list in the comments below. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on this topic. And as always, if you like this video, click that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for much more content like this. That's all for now though. This is WillFoxification signing off. See you in the next video.